The Minnesota Wild pick up a thrilling OT win 3-2 thanks to Dewar's goal 21-17. We've got a lot to discuss on today's post-game reaction, so let's get to it.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duham, and this is Locked On Wild.
Post-game reaction coming to you here from Xcel Energy Center as the Minnesota Wild pick up a 3-2 win over the Chicago Blackhawks in OT. And the Minnesota Wild with plenty to discuss here in today's game. And I'm just going to go over the new format for these post games as we go throughout the course of the season. We're going to start with some reaction to the game. I'll share my thoughts of some of the things that we saw, and then we will turn it over to the audience. If you have anything that you want to pass along, any comments from the game, any reaction that you had to what we had going on, make sure to send those comments to us, and we will definitely get you in on the show as well. So, couple things that stood out for me here in tonight's game. Obviously, it's preseason, and so you didn't have the entirety of the roster out there. We had Connor Dewar, Brandon Duham out there with Nick Patan. You had a good contingent of the defense out there tonight with Kalen Addison, Alex Goligoski, John Merrill, and also Filip Gustavsson in net. And so going against a Chicago team that also didn't have a lot of their regulars on the ice, it's hard to judge sometimes what do we take away in these types of situations. But Connor Dewar, Brandon Duham, and Nick Patan, that line looked great all night. They were pushing the issue. They were generating scoring chances. They were coming up with just a ton of different ways to put stress on the Chicago Blackhawks goalie, Arvid Soderblom. And it led to a goal early on as Ryan O'Rourke with a shot from the top of the zone. Brandon Duham set a wonderful screen in front of Soderblom, and puck goes into the net. Wild tie the game at 1-1 at that point. The other line that looked really good here tonight was Sammy Walker, Adam Beckman, and Vinny Lettieri. That line was buzzing all night long, generating chances themselves. Adam Beckman comes away with the goal, and I can't do it justice. The feed that Sammy Walker had across the crease to be able to get the puck to Adam Beckman and lead to a goal there was magnificent, just chef's kiss for the Wild there. So those two lines on offense, most on the defensive side, we've heard a lot about Kalen Addison and trying to get himself in position to be more of an impact player, especially defensively over the course of the season. And I thought Kalen had a solid game himself. It seemed like he was more determined in pursuit of Blackhawks players, whether it be just trying to out-physical them and push them off the puck, pursuing players moving around the zone. I thought he did a really good job with all of that out there on the ice here this evening. And so that was noticeable too. The PK did their job tonight, perfect on the PK tonight, and it was a lot of Brandon Duham and Connor Dewar featuring a plethora of other Minnesota Wild defensemen, but mostly Dewar and Duham, and they did a really good job in that situation all throughout the night. And, of course, Filip Gustavsson, who had 21 saves on 23 shots. The first goal that he allowed was off a deflected puck and got in position to make the initial save, but then the puck sailed to a different area. And so one of those situations where what do you really do as a goalie in order to, put yourself in a better position to be able to make the save. The second goal that sent this game to overtime, it was, again, a situation where there was a shot from the top of the zone, and it was deflected. Gustafsson made the initial save. The rebound kicked out to in front of the net, and you had three Blackhawks players right in perfect position to make the rebound and hammer it home. And so that ended up being the goal that sent us to OT. Connor Dewar, though, had other plans as 21 seconds into overtime, he ended up getting the game winner. And so a lot of good that we saw here. Again, still moving through the preseason. We haven't seen a lot of the Minnesota Wild regulars together. And so we will, as we move throughout the course of the rest of the preseason, got a couple more games to go before we start the regular season on October 12th. So those are some of the things that I noticed from up here in the press box. Just a Wild team. It was a physical game. The Wild did a good job of limiting chances for Chicago, especially in the third period. They had just 6 shots on net in the third period. And for the Minnesota Wilds, they had a couple of goals that could have gone in as well. Jujhar Khaira had one where he was in front of the net. The puck deflected off of him in past Soderblom, but Khaira was called for kicking the puck. And then you had that just absolute scrum in front of Soderblom in which it was nearly a Stephen Fogarty goal. They reviewed it after initially waving it off because Soderblom got pushed into his net. They reviewed it, and the puck was like that far away from hitting the line, going past into the net. So yes, it ended up being 3-2. In reality, it probably should have been 4-2, even 3-2 if one of those goals goes in to extend the lead. So all in all, I think a lot of the things that the Wild were hoping to see here in this one tonight were accomplished. Filip Gustavsson looked good. He had some great saves. Notably, there was a Chicago player on the right side of the crease, his right, and tried to kind of between the legs tip one in. But Gustavsson did a great job of walling off the shot, turning to his right, and slamming the door shut to prevent Chicago from scoring in that instance. So a lot of good that we saw here tonight. And as I noted in period 2, we heard from Dean Evison earlier in the preseason that Vinny Lettieri, he's got some grit to him. He's got some bite. He's got some heavy hitting ability. He showed that on full display here this evening too. And so it was a lot of fun to see some parts of the lineup, but also just seeing a bunch of guys that are out there competing and going against some of the prospects that Chicago has to offer. So all in all, things look good, and it's going to be fun to see when this lineup gets a little closer to full. I think we know pretty much what to expect in terms of placement, but we're in the portion of the year where we're excited to have hockey back, and it won't be too long before we have that full schedule in front of us starting on October 12th. We will take a short pause here as we continue our post game, and then we will take a look at some of the things that are coming up for this Minnesota Wild team, including a big cut coming this weekend as the Wild trim their roster close to regular season ready. We'll talk about all of that as we continue our Locked On Wild post game after this. There's nothing better, especially when we hit college football season and even when we hit NHL season, than opening DoorDash on your phone, going through to your favorite restaurant, and ordering your favorite entree or appetizer or dessert from whatever restaurant you choose and having it sent to your door without even having to get off the couch. Well, what if I told you DoorDash now also can help you with your grocery shopping? DoorDash has thousands of grocery stores to choose from. You'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKED at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKED. Don't forget, that's code LOCKED for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. Finishing up tonight's Locked On Wild postgame as we continue to take a look at some of the things we saw in tonight's 3-2 overtime win for the Minnesota Wild over the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, as we talked with Ben Gislason earlier in the week, it sounds as though the roster is going to be trimmed this weekend. The Wild will then head to Duluth for an opportunity to just kind of have team bonding and go with the what will likely be the regular season roster at that point. And then after that, a couple more preseason games for the Wild to get to here before all is said and done. Um, there will be a game on October 5th at the Chicago Blackhawks, and then on the 7th at home against Dallas. So that's all that's left on the preseason schedule. Those two games, we should have a pretty good indication as to what the regular season roster is going to look like. And so I would imagine we'll see guys like Vinny Lettieri, Nick Petan, Drew Jarkera, some of those guys given an opportunity to stick, at least in the preseason, with the NHL roster. And Nick Petan in particular, he played with Brandon Duhaime and Connor Dewar tonight, and I thought really looked good. He was a definitely an active part of that line with Dewar and Duhaime. He brings some feistiness to the table. He brings the ability to throw some hits around. And so if there is any sort of injury situation to Pat Maroon, Nick Petan may be a guy that gets thrown into the mix to play with the likes of Connor Dewar and Brandon Duhaime. On the defensive side, again, just really like what we have seen from Dakota Mermis. Had a chance to hop up with the NHL club last year for a few games and was just really solid here tonight on a pairing with John Merrill, as we saw Alex Goligoski paired with Kalen Addison for today. That was the defensive rotation that the Wild threw in out there on the ice. So what that means for the start of the regular season, I guess it remains to be seen. But at least for tonight, the defense did solid work of pushing people off the puck and moving the action up the ice in order to continue to try to push it the other way. A couple of other names that are notable here tonight. Carson Lambos, really from a physicality standpoint, stood out in this one tonight. It was fun to see him and Ryan O'Rourke do their things throughout the course of the game. And, whether those guys be 1-2 years away, at some point you figure that Lambos especially is going to get an opportunity to hop up to the NHL level and show what he has in his arsenal to be able to potentially help this team. So, also what we have coming up this week on Locked on Wild, we'll do a little speculating as to what the regular season roster will look like. It's pretty set, and so there's not a lot of speculation to come as to what it'll look like. We're also going to throw a few crossovers into the mix as well, trying to get as many Central Division opponents as we can on the schedule, and so we'll have a few of those for you as well. And just make sure that you subscribe and don't miss out on any of the content that Locked on Wild has lined up for you. We will be, throughout the course of the season, doing intermission videos, recapping what we saw period by period. Then, of course, we'll have our post games after every game is done. A lot of them will be right here at Xcel Energy Center, but we'll have the road games covered as well. So make sure you tune in. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, and on social media as well, so you don't miss out on anything that we have coming up for you as the season draws closer. We will also likely have a live stream before the season starts, a Wednesday night hangout before the first game of the season against the Florida Panthers. So be on the lookout for that. More details coming up as well. There's going to be no shortage of ways to find Locked on Wild content as we move throughout the course of the regular season. So make sure you tune in so you don't miss out, because Locked on Wild has you covered all season long with Minnesota Wild news and information, as well as recapping every game that the Wild have on their schedule. Again, the Wild win tonight 3-2 in overtime. And next up for them is a game at Chicago on October 5th. Until then, it's all about trimming that roster down closer to what we'll see at the start of the season. So for more on that and more on the Minnesota Wild, make sure you follow Locked On Wild wherever you listen to your podcasts.